Hello, everyone. Madeline Dale here. I've got a fantastic author for you guys to check out today. We're going to be chatting about his book, what he's got going on, and what he's got planned for the future. So I'm going to let this fantastic author introduce himself, tell us a little bit about his book and his work. So take it away.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thanks for having me on O Chapter Goddess. I worship you. I appreciate that. And it's good to be here. So you want me to start just me, Adam G. Fleming. It's nice to meet everyone. I have been writing since, I don't know, I was 4 probably, but writing seriously since around 2009 or so. I did a stage play first and then expanded it into a novel. And my first novel came out in 2012. So it's 10 years ago. And that one's called White Buffalo Gold. So that's I've been doing this for about 10 years. And so I live in Goshen, Indiana. It's not too far from South Bend, of the famous for Notre Dame University and their football and all that. And so we're just outside of there. I've been married 23 years. I have 4 kids, and I love to travel. Tomorrow I'm leaving for Belize for about 8 days, and I am looking forward to getting out of the cold. So,
I don't blame you.
Yeah,
cold, warm weather. So Go ahead and tell us about your book, Great Migration.
Yeah, this is called Satchel Pong and the Great Migration. I've got it right here with me. My local bookstore's out of stock. I need to take some copies over there today. So that's always nice when you go in the local bookstore and you see that on the shelf where they have local authors, and you're like, hey, you don't have, because I have there's 5 more books in this, or 4 more books in the series. There's 5 total. So I was like, you're going to need some more of these, book number 1, because you're not going to sell books 2, 3, 4, and 5 if you don't have these in stock. So we got to get those out there. Satchel Pong is a meteorologist in a fantasy world that's kind of a steampunk. You can see the steampunk element on there right away, and he is kind of a government official meteorologist. So he's supposed to give a weather report annually, but he's been slacking for like 10 years, like a good government official, like what you would expect from somebody. And because he knows that he's been watching the trend and the world is getting hotter. Now, I'm not a global warming campaigner. It's just an interesting what if. But he's got to decide, what am I going to do about this? And he starts getting challenged on the street by just the average passerby, like, you haven't given a report. You're not doing your job, So he ends up leading the Great Migration, and he gets in contact with the dirigibles, which he doesn't know what they look like because his island nation is kind of constantly covered in clouds. So airships can go overhead and they never see them. So that's kind of the premise. And then the whole series kind of spins out to maybe not only leaving our island chain, but maybe we're going to have to go off world somewhere. So there may be some interstellar travel happening. How you do that with a dirigible, you'll have to read it and find out.
That's fascinating. And really, with fantasy, anything can happen. So right. I actually have not read a whole lot of steampunk. So I might have to, for sure, grab me a paperback copy of this, because I prefer paperback sometimes over ebook, just because, my brain with technology, working at the computer and stuff all day, it's like, okay, just need a break. But this sounds like a fascinating story. And you said there were 4 books?
There's 5. So we have Satchel Pong and the Great Migration. They're all in boxes here. I'm not going to pull them out, but then we have Satchel Pong and the Search for Emil Ennis. Mm-hmm. Then Antoinette Jo and the Sky Dwellers. So then we start to introduce, it takes a couple books to actually kind of know what's going on with the dirigibles up there. And then the 4th one is called St. Kipstopher and the Miraculous Yarkarma, which is like a fantasy species of tree. Mm-hmm. That there's a miracle that happens with this tree. And then the 5th one is called The Prophets of Doom and the Leaping Hedgehog.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like a fun title.
I really have fun writing the series. And, a lot of steampunk can be kind of dark. But I tend to bring kind of a lighthearted, even though it's a dystopian world, like everything's getting hotter, are we all going to die? But it's really just it's a fun ride. Like it's not super dark.
Nice. Where did you get the creative ideas for all the different characters and the different species you've got going on?
I think sometimes people think that there's some kind of magic, but I think the reality is that a lot of that comes out as you're writing. You're just kind of moving along through, you sort of have an idea of where the character needs to get to next, or what the next danger point is going to be that they have to, or conflict that they have to resolve. And then you just kind of keep going, and things sort of come out as you write. So the story for the idea for the whole series came from another book that I'm writing, because I'm always kind of creating worlds within worlds. And it's just briefly, because I don't even have it done yet, but it's a rock band, and they find this kind of fantasy book, and then they start arguing about like what it means and all that stuff. So that's more set like in the real world, where they find Satopong. But I was like, I want some really rich background for that. So I'm going to write this book. And I didn't think I was going to publish it. And then 2 years later, I pulled it out and looked at it. I was like, this is 85% done. And I kind of like it. I think I'm going to finish it. And then once I finished Satchel Pong and the Great Migration, I was like, oh, I left some hanging storylines. Maybe I should write another book. And now it's done. There's 5 books, and that's the whole series. So
it's fun how like stories carry you away like that as you write them.
They do, totally.
Yeah, and the characters like, no, we're not done yet. Kind of like,
we're not
just
done.
Keep going. Yep. Mine argue with me, and I'm like, no, I need a break.
No, I'm gonna just kill you, actually.
I mean, some of them I have. I'm like, no, you're going. I'm actually struggling with a character issue similar to that right now with the second book I'm writing in my trilogy. I'm like, oh, do I really want to do that? Because it would add more like drama to what's going on, but at the same time I'm like, okay, maybe not. It's toying with the idea, because like it's the second book in the trilogy, and I'm just like, oh. So spoiler alert, guys, but I'm not telling you I'm killing off, so my readers might hate me at the end of it, but you never know how it's going to affect your readers.
No, I think there was one time that I tried to kill a character, and I got some ARC readers, advanced reader copy people said, you can't kill this character. Like, you need them in the next book. So I had to back off.
Yeah.
And it's, whether it's an ARC reader or an editor, it's really important to have outside perspective before you put stuff out in the world. So in some way, you've got to get feedback. Yeah. Not that you can't still exert like your own artistic control over things, but it's really hard to see yourself without a mirror. So, you can't comb your hair without a mirror. How do you think you could write a novel without one?
Exactly. And speaking of editing, what is your editing process like? Do you have a certain method that you do?
So I don't really, I know Stephen King says, write the entire first draft, don't let anybody look at it. But oftentimes I'll read even the raw stuff to my wife at the end of a writing session. I'll just sit down with her in the evening and go, because she's kind of my canary in the gold mine. If she laughs, if she cries, if she says, there's 3 things I'm looking for. If she says, this is deeper than you realize, like you've got something deep going on here philosophically or whatever. Then I know I'm on the right track, and I can always go back and massage the content and stuff later. But she's actually the one that told me at one point, like, you can't kill this character.
Nice.
You can maim them, but you can't.
Yes. Like, don't take this character out of this book.
No.
I might cut you off from dinner or something.
Yeah.
Make your life miserable. Don't do it.
Yeah. I can't get cut off for dinner. That's bad.
Yes. Gotta eat. So you mentioned the world building was kind of ties into another book you're working on. Have you had to do any research? Like, what have you put into the world building process to create this?
Yeah, I don't really know how dirigibles work. So I just made up a gas that works in that world that they can extract from the ambient air. So they have like a machine, it's called lithium. and they just extract it from the air. And I don't explain how that works. It's just like, like you could extract trace helium from the air in our world and then channel it into funnel it into your envelope of your balloon. And that's about as much science as there is in there. Like, just trust me, the dirigibles fly. Yes. That's all you need to know. So it's not heavy sci-fi. And I do research for real world stuff, like the other book that this is set in has I do tons of reading and research. But as far as researching for sci-fi, like I think, or for steampunk stuff, I would say reading other steampunk. Definitely. I read some China Mieville. He's really dark compared to me. I don't mind reading dark stuff. I just don't like read it. And maybe a few others too. There was one with the moving cities. They made a book out of it that bombed. Made a movie out of the book, and the movie bombed a year or two ago. The cities like crawled around on tractor treads or something.
Oh, I think I remember seeing an advertisement for that.
So I read that book before the movie came out, actually, and it was an interesting concept, but it was like really hard to swallow the idea that you could fuel a 7-layer cake of a city.
Wow.
and actually drive it around very long. And the whole premise was like they're constantly looking for wood and stuff to burn so that they can keep the treads rolling. But it was a stretch because it sounded really heavy.
Yeah.
Sounded really heavy. So it's like that would take a lot of fuel to move that thing. But at the same time, like I did the same thing. Like, just trust me, it works. And it's more for the premise and the fun of the story. And if you're too hung up on the science, it's not the book for you.
For real. You got to let your imagination take over with that, I'd say.
That's right.
Which fantasy is using a lot of your imagination when you read it. That's how you see the story. Instead of just like seeing words, you see like an actual scene play out. And I've always found that fascinating. And I didn't really think that much into it till I think I came across a meme on Facebook about how we hallucinate looking at parts of trees or something. And I was like, that's kind of true. So we stare at dead trees and hallucinate.
Yeah. Sure.
Back into the story, your characters. Did you have a character in particular that you enjoyed writing the most?
Well, I think probably the title characters of book 2 and 3 had a lot of fun with Emil Ennis, who's kind of the title character in book 2. I don't think it's that much of a spoiler to say, like, steampunk, it often has like a lot of modification, like kind of part man, part machine type of thing. And it's not digital like a cyborg. It's like mechanical, like an automaton or whatever. And so I created this character who he's kind of like the fighter in the group, and they installed like shotgun, right? The people that are listening on audio can't see it, but like if you can imagine like a shotgun that would kind of project from the forearm and shoot straight forward whenever he kind of puts his arm up like this, sort of like Wolverine's knives on his hands. And then it turns out that he kind of fuels that just by eating meat. He just becomes almost like a werewolf in his craving for just like, it doesn't matter if it's caribou or bat meat or whatever is going on in the story. And so he was fun. And then Saint Kipster, the title character of the 4th book, was really fun too, to kind of, I won't say who he was in a previous book, but he has a name change at when the miracle happens, and he becomes this saintly character. And that was fun to execute the transformation from a previous character in book 3 into a different. He's still the same guy. He has some of the same, wisdom or abilities from his previous life, but he really just transforms his life in one moment and says, I'm a different person now, gives himself a new name. And that was pretty fun too. So,
wow. I like how that he sounds like a fascinating character, how he pivots from one person to like the next, instead of the miracle that happens.
Yeah.
Right. I'm curious about that. I'm not going to ask because it'll be a spoiler, but I'm definitely going to have to read to find out because that's pretty cool. I like
Well,
that. Like that's
let's
good
just
character
say, like,
growth.
he doesn't really know what to do with it. I mean, if
Mhm.
you had like, if you had a miracle happen in your life, but you didn't have context for it, within your previous belief system, like, what would you do with that? So he kind of, there's a lot of character development in that fourth book.
That's
It's a
fascinating.
lot of fun.
I like it. And did you have fun writing the series? Did you feel like it was really
Oh,
good?
I had a blast.
Good.
Because I didn't have to research.
Yes, that's a plus to fantasy. I like that myself. So,
So the steampunk thing it gives you like a palette.
mhm.
Even if you would think of like a color palette, if you've looked at steampunk stuff on Instagram or whatever, you're going to see a
Yeah.
lot of sepia tones and stuff. And it gives you kind of a palette also of like what technology works and what doesn't.
Mhm.
But then as the series went on, I added different forms of like magic and miracles and things. So then all of a sudden, like, if we need to do interstellar travel and we need to do it with a dirigible, we
Yeah.
can do it.
Nice. I like that
So
you kind of like mixed it all together. That's
you
that's
start
what makes it fun.
you start by constricting like your palette. In other words, like if you're a painter and you only have blue and white on your on your your painting palette,
Yeah.
then you're gonna have a blue and white. And then, but it's kind of like saying, I started this painting and planned to do it all with blue and white, and then I added a little bit of red, or I added a little bit of something,
Yeah.
and then it gives you a little bit more flexibility and freedom, but you still kind of fits within the form of that blue and white or the steampunk, kind of concept. So it was fun.
Yes, that's great. So with this story, since you didn't really have to do a whole lot of research, would you say you plotted it or did you kind of like pants it? Like how did that whole process go for you?
Yeah, all by the seat of my pants. And sometimes there's these serendipitous moments. As you were asking me, like, how did you think up these different things? They really happen while you're typing. And you realize, oh, this thing that I set up, I wasn't setting anything up in the first book, but I can now use it in book 3 um, as something a lot more meaningful. Uh, how do I say this without being too much of a spoiler? Um, there's one culture in this world that uses the term river sludge
Mhm.
as a curse word. And so that's just kind of in there, like that river sludging this and so and river sludge that. And it's kind of comical and whatever. But at the end of one of the books, you begin to realize that it has a lot more deep meaning in their culture, and it ends up being super instrumental in a massive plot twist. Just the idea that the sludge at the bottom of the river is considered gross,
Yeah.
which it,
That,
it, it is, right?
yeah, yeah.
It's mucky, it's kind of,
Mhm.
and they don't like it. And so I won't say a whole lot more about that, but it, 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 it was like in the first or second book, I started using the term. And in the third or fourth or fifth book, I won't say which, all of a sudden it just became like this really important plot. It played a part in a plot twist. So
Ooh,
yeah,
that's cool.
yeah.
Yes. So with writing and everything, do you have a writing routine or do you just write when the inspiration hits?
Well, sort of in between. So I'm as my profession is, I'm also a leadership coach. I've done training. I train people how to coach, how to listen better, how to ask great questions, that kind of stuff. And I also do personal coaching, which I have like the calendar link that my clients can sign up and stuff like that. And they could sign up anytime between, 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. And so every day is different for me.
Mhm.
Um, so the routine is to work on my fiction at some time in every day. I need an hour block to do something. Today, my block was audio recording an older book because I've just started getting a lot of my older books on audio because book readers now 30% or more are reading on audio. So um, anyway, so it's not really a routine because it could come at any time during the day, but it
Mhm.
needs, it's part of a daily routine, I should say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's kind of just like when you get the chance to write.
It's definitely not just when the inspiration strikes.
Yeah, it's when you get the time to do it.
You'll never produce anything if you wait for the inspiration to strike. Like I was talking about the river sludge thing, and the serendipitous moment where I'm just typing along and I go, oh, I can use that.
Yes,
this is going to be awesome. It happened while I was typing. The inspiration comes while you're working, not you can't sit back and wait for it to hit you.
Yeah. And I'm like that because I'm constantly doing stuff. Being a mom, I'm like, everything's chaos. And my inspiration for everything like that hits me when I'm like doing the dishes or like in the shower or something. And I'm like, I can't write this right now. Like, I'm just going to have to wait.
Right. Well, I do have moments like there was a project I was working on that was more like a ghostwriting project for somebody else where I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I was like, oh, I got an idea for this. And so that does happen. It's not that inspiration doesn't happen when I'm in the shower or in that halfway state between dreaming and waking up or whatever, because that does happen. But you just can't sit around and wait for it. Because it's not often enough. That's kind of what I'm saying about inspiration. So
yeah. So in your books, do you feel like there's a recurring theme?
Yes, definitely. Recurring theme that I love to travel. So a lot of my characters are travelers. I think that I write somewhere on like a tightrope between, I like to say between the, like life is this constant tightrope between the absurd and the sublime.
Mm-hmm.
So the recurring theme is like, this is all absurd and it's all beautiful all at the same time, and I don't know, I guess that's just kind of my worldview that keeps popping in, to everything that I write, whether it's poetry or fantasy fiction or real world fiction.
Mm-hmm. Kind of makes me think of Beautiful Chaos as like a summary for it. I like that. So I feel like that's definitely like life in general. So
yep. And the last theme I think is that I realized at one point somebody asked me a great coaching question, which was if you could change one thing for the whole world just by pushing a red button, what would it be? And I actually was just really emotional about that and said everybody in the world ought to have at least one good friend who doesn't judge them. And that's how I function as a leadership coach. But I actually believe that that's part of what I hope that my books will do. Groucho Marx said that outside of a dog, a book is a man's best friend. Inside a dog, it's too dark to read. Yeah. So I like to think of I want my books for people to read them and feel some sense of hope in the beauty of chaos, in the chaos and the beauty, some sense of hope and some sense of even like that book was a friend, or even that they feel like they could email me because I'm going to be friendly, which I am. So I want it to be an extension of the friendliness that I am, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's a good way to go, because I like my readers to reach out and chat with me too. And it's just sometimes they can bounce an idea off of you and it's different, and sometimes like we all need that extra like person in our life. So
I talked to a guy who is a cartoonist, published his own book of cartoons. And he was like, how do I do this better so that I don't, he was talking about, can I get it on Amazon so it's print on demand and people can order it? Because I hate going to the post office. And I get it. It's a chore. I'm not criticizing him, but I love it when somebody buys an autograph book from me and I have to go to the post office.
Yes.
I love that. So I love signing books for people and, shipping them out.
Yes. And it's more like it's a special thing to have an autograph copy, because I love autograph books. They're kind of scattered because my house, we've been doing renovations and we just had to floor put down and stuff. And it's just, they're in a box, but I have like a good stack. And I'm just like, yes. And some of them, I'm like, I know these people, like, yay.
I actually have an autograph shelf on the white bookshelf back here where I got them all organized and put them in one place. I found a Garrison Keillor at the local independent bookstore sitting on the shelf that was not for autographs. It was just like in the regular stuff. I bought it and brought it home and opened it. And I was like, this is autographed by Garrison Keillor. I can't believe I picked it up without noticing, and they hadn't noticed either. So, it's fun. It's fun to get autographed books of people and or famous people, or famous people that. Fame is a sliding scale.
It is. Yes, and I like that you have
you're famous, right?
We can pretend I am. Maybe one day. I mean,
whoever's watching this thinks you are.
Yes, I guess so. And I love that you have a specific bookshelf for the autographed copies. I think I'm going to steal that idea because I do need another bookshelf. So maybe it would help me get organized better.
It also it'll help you make sure you don't accidentally get rid of them. Because my wife will occasionally go through the house putting a box of books together, like, let's get rid of all these. And I would not want to have an autographed copy disappear that way. So
I do that on occasion. I do that frequently, but when it comes to the books, I'm like, because I have such an attachment. I'm like, I know I read this, and I'm like, am I going to go back and read it? I don't know, but I read this book and I want to keep it because I'm totally like a book hoarder, and it's just I want to someday have a whole room that's a library. And it's kind of not doable right now, but it's hard to get rid of those books. You don't want to.
My almost 17-year-old will be out of the house in a year and a half. His room's going to become the library, whether he likes it or not.
There you go. Extra space.
I do have some giveaways that I do have another shelf over here. Mm-hmm. Stuff that I've read that I enjoyed, but don't need to keep.
Yeah.
So I made a whole bookshelf. Like if somebody orders like 5 books from me, I'm going to throw a freebie in there. From some other author, and it could be Stephen King, it could be somebody you never heard of, but and it might be a book you already have or read. So what? Just give it away.
Yeah.
Pass on the love. So
that's a great idea. I have a bunch of books that I'm like, these were okay, and just not what I want to keep, because some of them are like book of the month box.
Yeah.
And I'm like, these are okay, but I don't know if I really want to keep them. So that's a great idea. I might have to start doing that too. You got all these genius ideas.
Steal all my ideas.
I'm going to. I got to get my bookshelves organized just a little bit first, but that's a genius. Yeah. So with your writing and everything you've got going on in life, something I like to ask all the authors I interview is, what do you do for self-care? Do you focus on self-care much?
Yeah. Well, as a leadership coach, of course I do. I suppose there probably are some who don't, but I took a sabbatical. I walked the Camino de Santiago in November, 200 plus miles of walking in a couple weeks. And I still walk every day. And I believe that walking is the other place where your ideas marinate and percolate and brew, because I'm not really focused on anything. It's almost like meditative, but I don't sit to meditate. I walk. And at least this year so far, in the first month and a half, I haven't missed a day, and I average about 4 miles. So I try to walk at least an hour every day. Occasionally I'll just do 1 or 2 miles. Here in Indiana, it's pretty cold in January. But I still made myself go out and do it. So I walk. That's probably my biggest thing. And I don't make the other thing that I do is I just make sure that my days aren't like a lot longer than 8-9 hours. Mm-hmm. When the evening comes and we eat dinner, I shut it down. Even if I feel like there's more that should be done or ought to be done, you got to make it wait till tomorrow. And that's kind of self-care for the self-employed entrepreneur.
Yes.
You just can't work constantly. It's not possible. It's not healthy long-term. So I just shut it down. Those are 2 main things that I do.
That's great advice and great self-care. I struggle myself with shutting it down at a certain time because I've got so many different irons on the fire with being a mom and then doing all the writing and doing the interviews and stuff. But I've been trying really hard to, as soon as my son's down, nope, no electronics. We're going to read a book and just chill. So.
Yep. And that's the benefit of having a paperback book, is you're not looking at a screen before you go to bed. And people are like, oh, you can get my book on e-reader or whatever. And I go, probably won't. Because I do most of my reading right before bed, and I use paper.
I've been trying to save up more to get more paperbacks from indie authors than like the ebooks, which I do still occasionally read the ebook, but I don't like pull it up before bed if I can help it anyway. And it just,
right.
If it's a really, really good book that I've gotten into, I'm like, okay, I'll read it for a little bit, but then I'm going to just chill for a little bit and not have screens for like at least an hour. So
yeah. And I'm not a huge audiobook reader either. Although I've done a couple in the last few months while I was walking. Well, one thing is it kind of takes my mind away from getting to just really drift.
mm-hmm.
And I don't focus very well when I'm listening compared to when I'm reading visually.
Mm-hmm.
But one, I wanted to be able to write like a review for the guy, because it was a guy I knew, the publisher. He wanted me to review this guy's book. And the other one was, I think my local bookstore gave me a free audiobook. So I was like, well, might as well get one. And so, but I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah.
But I'm producing them, and I'm really good at that. So I'm excited about that too.
That's good. And you have it right there in front of you. So technically you're reading it. So, right?
Well, I mean, I'm producing my own, but yeah, but I may be producing other people's audiobooks at some point too. So
nice. I'm about the same way with audiobooks. I will listen to them a little bit while I'm cleaning and stuff, but I also eventually, like, I'll be so focused on task, I tune out the book, even if my headphones are in my ear and I'm like, wait, what happened? So yeah. I'm with you about it's easier to have it like physically in front of you. So
I like to give my book my full attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
See the words on the page.
Yeah.
If you could give advice to a new author, someone that's just starting out, what kind of advice would you give?
I think we've probably already touched on the ideas around inspiration and, I mean, I guess oftentimes I hear that question framed as like, if it's an aspiring author. So I understand as a coach, there's two kinds of core values. Well, there's lots of different ways to categorize core values, but one way to categorize core values is aspirational values and active values. Mm-hmm. So there's an aspirational values like someday I want to write every day. Then when I've done trainings on this, I've taken a picture of a little boy who's got a toy airplane, and he's going like this, with his hand up in the air, and you can see that he's pretending to fly it. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have a pilot's license, obviously. He's like 7. Yeah. So he has an aspirational value of being a pilot. And obviously that requires classes and so forth. Like, you don't just turn that into a practiced core value of your life overnight, but writing you can. Mm-hmm. So if you aspire to be a writer, then you just need to write. Like it's that simple. Make it a value that you're living, as opposed to one that you're dreaming or thinking about. And trust that the inspiration will come as your fingers are typing or as your pen is moving across the page. And I think that's probably the biggest for aspiring authors. Stop aspiring, start writing. That's it.
Yes. I love that. Stop aspiring and start writing. That's excellent. Awesome. Well, go ahead and tell our listeners and viewers where they can find you on social media and where they can find your work.
Great. So my website is Adam G. Fleming with 1 M, FLEMING.com. Very simple. It's just my name. And on Instagram, I'm Adam_G_Fleming. And on Facebook, I'm Adam G. Fleming author. And I think on LinkedIn, it's just Adam Fleming. No, there's a G, Adam G. Fleming still. And then, of course, if you search Adam G. Fleming and Satchel Paugh and the Great Migration on Amazon, you'll find me there. And you can email me at agf@adamgfleming.com.
Awesome. Well, Adam, thank you so much for hanging out with me on the show today.
Thanks, Madeline. We worship you, O chapter goddess. Keep on writing, everybody, and reading.
Yes.